pua o ke aali. Po lena ha lena I ka waie. Lei ia e ke oho kalu nua o ke uki. No ho pu uki ka maka o ke ko o lau. Ku umau hoa ka iaulu o lalo e. O lalo ho ki vai aka na ulu. I kahi mea iki. Huna. Ma ka huna. Ha me he haila I ka pili. O whoever he mai komo mai ki e o Hawaii I luna o ke kai o ale nui haha ho'olono o Maui ke kai o alala keiki he keiki o ka ho'olawe a kana loho anana no I kuhi ke ala I ka hiki hiki na e aku leila na I ke kai o au Au aku ia pailolo, aia la o molo ka ie. A ka iwi ke kai ha nupa, upua e ka mana o I ka pohula I o ahu. Ahu wale o ka ua I mai ke kai o ka ie waho. Ma waho kaula kahi, ike ia ka ehu kai o ni I haue. Hau o liloa au I kanani e pā hola ia mai. Mai ka ia he molele ka maluhia o nā kai e walu. Ua I ke a aloha kākou e aloha.
Mahalo to Kumuhula Kaleo Trinidad and his conch blower from Kamehameha Schools for the beautiful Oli to start our ceremony. My name is Michael Carr. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the USS Missouri Memorial Association. It's my great honor to be your Master of Ceremonies this morning. Veterans, USS Missouri crew members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, aloha, and thank you for being with us here today on board the USS Missouri and historic Pearl Harbor. For those who could not make it down here this morning, we're live streaming this event at our website, ussmissouri.org, for the first time ever, so that people around the world can virtually join us as we commemorate, remember, and reflect on a day that launched a better future 70 years ago today. We're fortunate to have many distinguished guests from near and far joining us this morning. I'd like to acknowledge our special guests, and please hold your applause until the end of each group, if you don't mind. First and foremost, it is our special honor today to recognize the USS Missouri crew members who were present at this surrender ceremony 70 years ago today on board this ship. And I'd like to ask them to stand one by one if they're able, and as I call their names. Mr. Art Albert. Always great to see you, Art. I think Art has been here every year for 15 years. No, Art, stay standing, Art. Art, stand up again. Jack Brock, Lee Ray Broussard, Philip Conini, Sam Dawson, Lindsay Edwards, Donald Forsberg, Gene Morse, Ray Morse, Tom Schonecker, and Robert Watts. Ladies and gentlemen, the crewmen of the USS Missouri. Thank you all so much for making the effort to come and joining us this morning. Actually, I was going to ask them to please remain standing as we welcome all of our World War II veterans in attendance with us today, including Herman Baca, Sterling Kale, Richard Chun, Henry Lee, Eugenia Woodward, Herbert Yanamura, Ted Tsukayama, Yoshio Shiro, James Yanagita, Bob Anderson, Edward Rose, William Schultz. Will all of these gentlemen and all the World War II veterans please stand and be recognized? And I'm ashamed for forgetting one name, and I know I'll hear about it later because he is one of the founders of this organization, Mr. Ed Carter. We're also very honored to have many military dignitaries with us here today, and I'd like to recognize the following ones. Admiral Harry Harris, Commander, U.S. Pacific Command. Lieutenant General John Toolan, Commanding General, U.S. Marine Corps Forces Pacific. Lieutenant General Anthony Crutchfield, Deputy Commander, USS Pacific Command. Lieutenant General Russell Handy, Commander, Alaskan Command. And Lieutenant General Dan Leaf, Retired Director of Asia-Pacific Security Studies. Please stand and be recognized, along with our flag and general officers and senior executive service officials. I would now like to recognize our elected officials and thank them for their support of the Battleship Missouri Memorial. Hawaii's congressional delegation is here. Please show your aloha to Senator Brian Schatz, who will present today's keynote address. Brian? Senator Mazie Hirono. Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. And Congressman Mark Takai. You'll hear from Mark shortly because he'll be making a special presentation on behalf of the entire delegation. And I'd like to say aloha and welcome to all our visiting members of Congress who are here in Hawaii on business to learn more about our state's esteemed naval assets. Would all of them please stand and be recognized? We're also honored to have with us this morning the mayor in the city and county of Honolulu, Mayor Kirk Caldwell. How about that traffic this morning, huh, Mayor? Sorry, I had to do that. A big mahalo to the Council Generals representing Japan, Australia, the Republic of Korea, Micronesia, and the Philippines, and to the members of the Hawaii State Legislature for joining us today. Would they please stand and be recognized? Finally, join me in welcoming the individuals responsible for being the caretakers of the Battleship Missouri Memorial, my bosses, the members of the USS Missouri Memorial Association's Board of Directors. Please stand. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the parading of colors and remain standing for the performance of our national anthem, our state song, Hawaii Pono'i, and the Invocation. The colors will be administered by the U.S. Pacific Command Color Guard. Our national anthem will be performed by Linda Martin, one of our beloved tour guides here at the Battleship Missouri Memorial, and Hawaii Pono'i will be performed by the Kamehameha Schools Kapalama High School Concert Glee Club. Color Guard, parade the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
retire the colors. Offering this morning's invocation is Chaplain Lieutenant Colonel James Blount.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you this day asking for your many blessings to be upon this 70th anniversary of the end of World War II ceremony as we commemorate the surrender ceremony which was held on September 2, 1945 aboard the U.S. Battleship Missouri, at which officials from the Japanese government signed the Japanese Instrument of Surrender, ending World War II. We honor and remember forever those brave men and women of our armed forces who made the ultimate sacrifice so that future generations of Americans could live in freedom. Many died so young so that we could have our families and grow old. We are inspired by their heroism and gallantry, and we are moved to better ourselves because of their example. Heavenly Father, as we continue with this ceremony, may we be renewed in our convictions of service and sacrifice for our great country and the world. Amen.
Thank you, Chaplain Blount. Please be seated. Let's just take a moment and think about where we are. Just a few hundred yards beyond this pier, in the quiet waters of Pearl Harbor, lies the USS Arizona, the eternal resting place for more than 1,200 sailors and Marines today, is where our nation's involvement in World War II began. The USS Missouri, a majestic setting for today's event, served as the site where Imperial Japan formally surrendered to Allied forces 70 years ago, bringing light to what felt like a never-ending darkness. These two iconic battleships represent America's bookends for history's most destructive war, a beginning and an end, conflict and then peace. The ceremony of Japan's formal surrender began at 9:02 a.m. in Tokyo Bay, and it took less than half an hour. The war was over, and hope was restored. And the two countries that were once enemies began a new relationship based on respect, cooperation, and friendship that continues to this day. The ceremony 70 years ago today was an event that history will never forget. Right here on board the USS Missouri, you'll find historic artifacts that tell the account of what took place that day. Photographs, a plaque over the exact spot where the ceremony took place, and a replica of the surrender documents signed by the United States, by Japan and the Allied forces. Today, we're especially fortunate to have some of the artifacts that were part of the ceremony 70 years ago. Here to talk about these pieces, what they meant to the surrender ceremony, and how they've come to be with us today is Michael Lilly. Michael is a retired captain in the U.S. Navy and a longtime board member of the USS Missouri Memorial Association. Please welcome Michael to the podium.
I am honored to recognize a special guest here today, my friend Chester Nimitz Lay and his lovely wife, Marion. Chester, will you? Chet Lay, grandson of Admiral Nimitz. On September 2, 1945, you will see in a movie that will be shown a little later here, you will see Fleet Admiral Nimitz walk up to the surrender table after MacArthur signed, and he pulls out of his left pocket 2 pence, and he puts them on a surrender table, sits down, and he uncaps a gold-capped pen. And he uses that to sign the Japanese the Allied copy of the surrender. And then he uses an old green Parker pen of his that he carried around for years and wrote all of his letters to his wife during the war, and he signs the Japanese version. That green pen went back to the Naval Academy and is in the museum there. After the surrender, when Nimitz came back to the United States, he met with the person who gave him that pen, his neighbor and friend Y.C. Wu, that was the head of the Bank of Canton in San Francisco. And he inscribes the pen that he gave him, this Parker 51 pen, as Victory Pen with his name, and he returns it to Y.C. Wu. Y.C. Wu later turns that pen over to Chiang Kai-shek, and the pen disappears into history. Now we go 4 years ago, a friend of mine, historian Jeff Harding. Jeff, are you there? And your lovely wife, Teresa. Jeff took it upon himself to find that pen. Where is it? And he tracked down Y.C. Wu's grandson, Paul. Paul, would you stand, and your lovely wife, Melanie? Grandson of Y.C. Wu. He worked at the University of Chicago, and he went through Chinese exchange students. He thought the pen was in Taiwan when Chiang Kai-shek fled to Taiwan, but it wasn't. It turned out they located it, and it was with the Nanjing Museum. That's where the pen has been since the war. Now, last year, I took on some people said, an impossible task. I wanted that Wu pen, the Victory pen, here for the 70th reunion, and the green Parker pen from the Naval Academy. So I wrote to the ambassador the Chinese ambassador in Washington, D.C. I'm going to butcher this, but Sui Tian Kai, and I did a good job, huh? I got an email back from Tang Xuan. He's a counselor, and I've been corresponding. Mr. Tang, he's with the ambassador in Washington, D.C. And also representing the ambassador, Sui Tian Kai, is Mr. Li Keishin. Thank you. Here's my pitch. Here's an opportunity for China and the United States to come together in fellowship, to recognize when we were comrade at arms, we were brothers in arms fighting a common foe. We were allies. China was the next nation to sign the surrender document after Nimitz. What a perfect opportunity if we could come together in fellowship and recognize our friendship from 70 years ago. And I suggest this is the only time this would ever happen. And the Chinese ambassador, through Mr. Tang, introduced me to the Nanjing Museum curator, and through that and the work of Mike Carr, we were able to work out a loan agreement, and it is here. Mr. Ouyang, are you here, Mr. Ouyang? Mr. Ouyang. Thank you. Xie xie, Mr. Ouyang, and xie xie to Sui Tian Kai. Mr. Ouyang hand-carried the Wu pen here, and the Naval Academy sent out the green Parker pen. So please don't leave the battleship today without going to the wardroom, because it'll be gone tomorrow. This is your last and only opportunity to see these two pens that helped end the war in World War II, brought together in friendship and fellowship. And that's not only those two pens are in there. We've got a lot of other artifacts. We've got one of Douglas MacArthur's pens. We have a lot of the surrender cards that people got. We've got MacArthur's battle flag that was flown over this ship with Nimitz's flag on the day of the surrender. And there's some marvelous artifacts up there that we've collected. So please don't leave without going up there. I thank you. Thank you for being here. This is a great occasion. I don't think it will ever be replicated again. Aloha.
Thank you, Michael. Those artifacts on display were part of that momentous ceremony 70 years ago today. Most of the exhibit will stay up through Veterans Day, but again, the pens, both of the Nimitz's pens, have to go back to their homes tomorrow. So please take the advantage of the opportunity to see them today. So picture this, more than 2,000 sailors and Marines who were stationed aboard the USS Missouri, crammed into every possible observation area to watch the proceedings. It was there that Supreme Allied Commander General Douglas MacArthur delivered the address that reverberated around the world. We'd like to show you a short video featuring color motion picture taken in Tokyo Bay that day and what audiences saw on newsreels and theaters throughout the U.S. as they witnessed the day that launched a better future.
Here comes the Supreme Commander of the Allied Forces, General of the Army, Douglas MacArthur. With him, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz and other dignitaries.
General MacArthur is now facing the microphones. He is about to start his speech.
Representatives of the major warring powers to conclude a solemn agreement whereby peace may be restored. The issues involving divergent ideals and ideologies have been determined on the battlefields of the world, and hence are not for our discussion or debate. Nor is it for us here to meet, representing, as we do, a majority of the peoples of the earth in a spirit of distrust, malice, or hatred. But rather it is for us, both victors and vanquished, to rise to that higher dignity which alone befits the sacred purposes we are about to serve, committing all of our peoples unreservedly to faithful compliance with the undertakings they are here formally to assume. It is my earnest hope, and indeed the hope of all mankind, that from this solemn occasion a better world shall emerge out of the blood and carnage of the past, a world founded upon faith and understanding, a world dedicated to the dignity of man and the fulfillment of his most cherished wish for freedom, tolerance, and justice. The terms and conditions upon which surrender of the Japanese imperial forces is here to be given and accepted are contained in the instrument of surrender now before you. As Supreme Commander for the Allied Powers, I announce it my firm purpose, in the tradition of the countries I represent, to proceed in the discharge of my responsibilities with justice and tolerance, while taking all necessary dispositions to ensure that the terms of surrender are fully, promptly, and faithfully complied with. Of the Emperor of Japan and the Japanese government and the Japanese Imperial General Headquarters to sign the instrument of surrender at the places indicated.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today to honor this anniversary of peace, and we're forever indebted to our heroes in uniform who served their country with relentless courage and honor and made this day possible. Their legacy lives on today through the men and women of our armed forces. Presenting the opening address of today's ceremony is Tim Gard, Chairman of the Board for the USS Missouri Memorial Association. Tim is the Chairman and CEO of McCabe, Hamilton & Rennie, Hawaii's largest and oldest stevedoring company. Tim had a distinguished career as an officer for the U.S. Navy during the Vietnam War, and Tim continues to be an ardent supporter of our armed forces. He's a proud member of the Navy League's Honolulu Council, and in 2011 was elected to its Lifetime Hall of Fame and presented with an American Patriots Award. He was also awarded the prestigious SICNAV Meritorious Public Service Citation by the U.S. Secretary of the Navy in recognition of his support. Please join me in welcoming Tim Gard.
Thank you, Mike, for those very generous compliments. In order to get all that stuff done, I had to live my life with a certain sense of urgency. It's a great, great pleasure for me to be here this morning as chairman of the board, representing our board members and our crew. This is a job that I'm going to have a hard time giving up. I'm just warning you, board, I really want to be around for a while longer. I've usually worked myself out of a job in the past, but this is one that I'd really like to stay with. I've had the great honor of being with the ship since we first saw it in Bremerton, Washington, many years ago, and we looked at it and said, this is not an insurmountable task, but certainly a challenging one to get the ship here from Bremerton to Hawaii. But with the cooperation and help and no small sum of money, in June of 1998, the ship arrived. It was towed here. Obviously, it didn't get underway on its own. It arrived here, and I remember it off of Waikiki, circling and being towed around in a circle off of Waikiki, and literally hundreds, if not thousands, of boats and small watercraft edging ever closer to the hull to see this magnificent relic, well, hardly a relic, this memorial of World War II and of our enduring strength and freedoms. It was the most amazing thing. We then went to work with this ship with literally thousands of volunteers. I'll bet you we have 500,000 volunteer hours pumped in over the course of the time that we've been here at Foxtrot 5. And we converted that ship from a mothballed, decommissioned ship, which those of you in the Navy can imagine what it looked like, into the most amazing visitor attraction and national memorial that exists in the United States. I think I can say that fairly, and I can say that proudly. And I want to thank Mike Carr, and I want to thank our remarkable crew on board here, as well as the legion of volunteers who have helped make it that way. We have a formidable task. It's a big ship. Somebody equated the task of maintaining the ship to the same thing that goes on with the Golden Gate Bridge. You start at one end, you get to the other, and you begin the whole process over again. Whether it's the teak decks or the upper superstructure or any element of this ship that needs work, it's being tended to by some very, very competent people. I want to thank our congressional staff for being here and a wonderful show of support this morning. I want to thank Congressman Takai for his leadership in bringing a congressional delegation here to share this amazing day with us. And by the way, man, it's just been chicken skin since the start. Could I ask, because I didn't hear it earlier, but I thought that was one of the most profoundly moving and wonderful national anthems that I have ever heard sung, along with Hawaii Pono'i. Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your musical talent with us. Marvelous. I have one definition that I have to put out to you. I'm going to, for a couple minutes longer, I'm going to use the term the USS Missouri. But I know I'm wildly out of order from anybody in that part of the country, particularly if they're from Hannibal, Missouri. But my good friend Ron Hayes, I know I'm going to hear from him later, because it is not the Missouri. It is pronounce it for me, will you, Mike? It's the Missouri. This is the USS Missouri. And if I use the term Missouri, it's done interchangeably and with apologies to anyone from that great state, okay? I particularly want to thank the heroes of World War II who are aboard the ship with us this morning. Can you imagine the long and remarkable journey that they've had in their lives, that they were here on the deck of the ship on September 2nd, 1945, and they're here with us this morning as well. And by gosh, they look great. And I'll tell you, you set a fine example that I would love to emulate if, you know, the good Lord doesn't take me and I start pushing grass at an earlier age. There are many more heroes that unfortunately are laid to their eternal rest in the waters here at Pearl Harbor that were the victims of Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. And next year, in 2016, we'll be celebrating the 75th anniversary commemorating that event. Pearl Harbor of today is a very different place than it was 75 years ago after the attack on Pearl Harbor and all that went on to restore the fleet, to take it back out into battle, and in the succeeding years, the remarkable fortress and the remarkable contributions that Pearl Harbor made to the winning of the war. Enough can't be said about the remarkable efforts of our servicemen and all of the civilian workers who were here as well to recharge the fleet and turn it back to the Western Pacific. Today, people from all over the world come to visit this ship. It's a reminder of the strength and enduring values of America. It's also, as Mike mentioned, the bookends of the war with the Arizona. We had a bit of a discussion, let me put it that way, with the National Park Service early on. And it was thought that maybe we ought to put the ship over on Main side, but some very astute people pointed out that there would be nothing better than the bow of the Missouri to be pointed head in towards the bow of the Arizona, pointed head out. And as Mike said, we serve today as the bookends of World War II, the beginning and the end, the beginning of that horrendous conflict and the amazing peace that we enjoy today, and the relationship that we have with our former adversary, now a great partner, a great friend, and colleagues who we deeply appreciate, the men and women citizens of Japan. I finally want to, I'll conclude these remarks by asking that the veterans of World War II, the crew members of the Missouri, please stand and be recognized one more time. You absolutely deserve it. And if you would kindly remain standing, I'd like all the veterans, all of our veterans here this morning to stand up and be recognized. God bless you all. In closing, let me just say, have a marvelous Missouri morning. Oh, I did say Missouri, didn't I?
Thank you, Tim, for your service to the nation and for the leadership of our organization. Congressman Mark Takai, I actually don't need notes to introduce Congressman Takai because he's been associated with our organization and been a supporter of what we've been doing here for many, many years, from mundane things like signage on Kamehameha Highway to make sure that the visitors know what exit to get off on, to visit Pearl Harbor, to more substantial things like getting congressional approval for the Joint Ticketing Center over at Pearl Harbor, which is a crucial element of our success. But Congressman Takai was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2014 and currently serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Committee on Small Business. He's been a member of Hawaii's National Guard for 14 years, holds the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He was deployed to the Middle East in 2009 in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Before being elected to Congress, he was a member of the Hawaii State House of Representatives for 20 years. And here to present an award of special recognition on behalf of the entire delegation to the USS Missouri Memorial Association, Congressman Mark Takai.
Good morning and aloha. It is great to see all of you here, and it's actually great to be here. I wanted to once again acknowledge my friend and colleague Randy Forbes and all the other members of Congress for being here today. It really symbolizes and shows how important this special event here, 70 years after the signing on September 2nd, 1945, is to the entire nation. I also wanted to thank all of the World War II veterans, acknowledge again everyone, all 10 of you who are here on the Battleship Missouri. In fact, I understand that one of you, and I don't know who, is in his original uniform from 70 years ago. So who is that gentleman? That is quite impressive. I wanted to spend some time just to talk a little bit about some special World War II veterans. As you remember, back 75 years ago when this war started, there were some challenges that the United States faced. One of them was how to address the fact that we had Japanese Americans living not only in Hawaii but throughout the nation. And the way that our nation addressed it was to call these people, these Americans, enemy aliens, and put many of them across the nation in what we call internment camps, some call concentration camps. In Hawaii, we had a few camps, but it was a difficult time for many Japanese American families who had to, unfortunately, go into the internment camps. But if you recall the stories, the famed stories about some of our famous World War II veterans, including Senator Dan Inouye, when they were allowed to come into the military, into the Army, many of them heard it and ran straight for miles to the recruitment centers and served admirably in the 100 Battalion, 442, and in the Pacific, the Military Intelligence Service. And I believe we have at least three of them here today, and I wanted to acknowledge them. We have Herb Yanamura, Ted Tsukiyama, and Yoshi Oshiro, and others, AJAs who served in the military. If you could stand, and can we recognize them? Remember, many of their families sat and waited for them to come home in internment camps. But here's the story. Many of these service members who went to Europe actually liberated Dachau, one of the concentration camps in Europe. So we have these Japanese Americans whose many families were in camps themselves, liberating another camp. That's one of many stories about World War II. But today, it's all about celebrating the past 70 years of peace. And I do want to acknowledge also Consul General Misawa and Yoko from Japan. If you can stand, and can we recognize them? I know a few days ago we were concerned about the weather with one storm coming and another storm behind it, but I can tell you, Mike and Tim, you did such a great job in keeping the bad weather away. In fact, I think today's morning is reminiscent of Tokyo Bay, September 2nd, 1945, when they said there were rays of sunshine that talked about the promise of the next few years. Well, I say that today's rays of sunshine, because it's truly a blessing, is the promise of the next 70 years of peace. And on behalf of the Congressional delegation, I'd like them to come up. Senator Brian Schatz, Senator Mazie Hirono, and Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard would like to present to Mike and Tim a certificate commemorating today's events.
That will be on display in our wardroom immediately after the ceremony. Thank you again, Mark. Admiral Scott Swift is with us today as our distinguished guest speaker. Admiral Swift assumed command of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in May, becoming the 35th commander since its establishment in February 1941. Admiral Swift's long list of service to our country includes overseas tours, participating in combat operations, Praying Mantis, Southern Watch, Enduring Freedom, and Iraqi Freedom. As you'll see in your program, Admiral Swift has also earned a long list of prestigious awards for his service to our country. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet and our distinguished guest speaker, Admiral Scott Swift.
Well, good morning and aloha. I guess I should start with thanking both Mike and Tim for providing this great venue. If it hadn't have been for the vision of the memorial and the association, we would still be having this ceremony somewhere today here in Hawaii, but not as fitting a venue as the USS Missouri. So I thank you for your leadership and commitment for that. To the Hawaiian Congressional Ohana, I am so thrilled that you are here today and participating in this ceremony. Senator Schatz, as was mentioned, we'll hear from you momentarily. Senator Hirono, Congressman Takai, I wish I had led your comments instead of followed them, and Congressman Gabbard as well. Thank you for that. We also have Chairman Forbes here with Congressman Courtney that have just brought an incredible delegation here from D.C. And all of us, from Admiral Harris and all of his subordinate component commanders, have cherished the opportunity to share our views here in the Pacific, speaking to you from the Pacific. So thank you for being here as well. Admiral Harris was supposed to be speaking here today. That might not mean anything to you now, but 10 minutes from now you may be wishing that he was actually the one. He was going to be on travel, so he asked me if I would stand in for him, and his plans changed, so obviously he was able to join us today, and being his subordinate, I asked him if he would like to rescind that invitation, and he said no, and I didn't ask him again. So it's an honor to be here speaking to you. You will hear a common theme in my comments, as you have heard from those that have gone before, and I'm sure those that will follow. And in fact, a shout out to Mayor Caldwell. He and I shared a speaking engagement a couple of weeks ago, and he made a connection, the same connection that was made earlier between Missouri and Arizona. And Mayor, full credit for your comments. I'm not going to do it the eloquence that you did it that evening, but I'm going to try. It was on this ship in Tokyo Bay that representatives of all the Allied powers in Japan ended World War II by signing the Instrument of September on this day in 1945. So spin the calendar ahead 70 years, and we gather here only a ship's length, as was mentioned previously, from USS Arizona. Perhaps the most famous icon representing the beginning of the war in the Pacific for so many Americans. Many Arizona sailors remain entombed within the ship they served, a reminder to all of those who serve our nation, do so without regard for reward or destiny. It is telling that many of those who survived the attack chose, upon their passing, to be interred alongside their shipmates, a solemn reminder that the prosperity we enjoy today was delivered by a generation committed to ensuring future generations would have as much or more than they did. Those whose destiny was to serve in USS Arizona on December 7th, 1941, honor us today as they stand in eternal watch, an example of anyone we would be honored to emulate. Like all who lost their lives during World War II, they guard an enduring peace that has allowed former enemies to become friends. As just one example, a young Japanese Imperial Navy pilot who participated in the surprise attack on Pearl Harbor had a son, who is now my very good friend and shipmate, Admiral Kawano, the chairman of the Japan Self-Defense Joint Force. In 1943, here in Pearl Harbor, a young U.S. Navy ensign, fresh from the Naval Academy, reported aboard the heavy cruiser USS New Orleans, serving in her the remaining 2 years of the Pacific Campaign. His son is now the commander of Pacific Fleet. 2 sons from fathers on opposing sides of the war in the Pacific, best of friends today, committed to delivering an enduring peace for tomorrow. A better outcome could not have imagined either on December 7th, 1941, or on September 2nd, 1945. It was the actions of those like our fathers who were so fortunate to survive the war, and even more so those that stand that silent eternal watch, that enabled so many nations to ride the rising post-war tide of security, stability, and prosperity that continues in their wake today. We are honored today, as been previously pointed out, by the presence of many World War II veterans, many of whom served here in the mighty Mo. We remain indebted to those veterans whose service demonstrated the selfless action of the greatest generation. I'd like to take a moment to recognize a few of those sailors to bring context and texture to the comments that have been already made. Mr. Ray Morse served on board the Mighty Mo as an electrician's mate. He watched firsthand the signing of the Instrument of Surrender from the weather decks above. In fact, you probably saw him as a young sailor in the film we just witnessed, standing along the rails. For many years, he has traveled from his hometown in Huntington, West Virginia, to attend this ceremony, and his presence here today makes this anniversary particularly special. One of Ray's shipmates, Mr. Jack Brock, is with us, having served in Mighty Mo's gunnery department. He was a side boy during the signing ceremony. He was just 18 years old at the time, turning 19 a few days later on September 9th. So happy birthday a little bit early. We're also honored by World War II veteran Miss Woodward, who was 43 years young today. In 1944, she was part of the first group of U.S. Navy waves who learned how to repair aerial photography cameras in New York and served in Norfolk during the war. She moved to Hawaii in 1990 and raised 3 children who serve in the armed forces today. It is truly a day of reverence. It's about reflecting on and commemorating the millions of departed and surviving veterans of World War II. It's about mourning the civilians of all nations whose passing is all the more poignant in light of their innocence. It's about our enduring commitment to allies, partners, and friends, a commitment to ensure such tragic losses and sacrifices are not for naught, demonstrated by the consistent presence of U.S. forces throughout the Indo-Asia Pacific. It's about upholding the international framework of norms, standards, rules, and laws that make our nation great. It's a binding agreement that formalized the transition from war to peace. The Instrument of Surrender illustrates that framework perfectly. As part of our heritage, it continues to shape our shared interests, values, and conduct in international affairs. As we saw in the film a few moments ago, when General MacArthur signed the Instrument of Surrender, there were 2 officers standing just behind him. On MacArthur's left was Lieutenant General Arthur Percival, who commanded British forces in Singapore and Malay. Next to him stood Lieutenant General Jonathan Wainwright, who commanded American and Filipino forces in the last days of Corregidor and Bataan. Many famous photographs capture this moment as well. In the weeks that followed the attack on Pearl Harbor, Japan's sweep through Asia, both men fought valiantly to the end of their resources, ultimately succumbing to Japanese forces in Southeast Asia. Both men suffered physically from years of captivity, haunted mentally by defeat, until their release to Allied forces from a prisoner of war camp in Manchuria. MacArthur asked for these men by name to witness this event. Standing behind him as he signed the instrument was 6 pens, giving the first to General Wainwright, the second to General Percival, in recognition of the fact that their leadership and sacrifice was as significant if not more so, than any who participated in the war. In the presence of General Wainwright and Percival on these decks 70 years ago, it was not about retribution. Like today's ceremony, it was an acknowledgement that the shared losses of World War II vastly exceeded the immediate gains at the time. A message not lost on the representatives from China, Russia, France, Great Britain, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the Netherlands, all who signed the instrument as well. The challenge for us going forward is to ensure the prosperity that rose from the ashes of war continues into the future. That is why MacArthur famously cautioned in his radio address before the ceremony, and I quote, "We have known the bitterness of defeat, the exaltation of triumph, and from both we have learned there can be no turning back. We must go forward to preserve in peace what we have won in war." As the Pacific Fleet Commander, under the leadership of Admiral Harris, I believe this is still the mandate that informs and guides everything we do alongside our allies, partners, and friends today in this region. While periods of friction and conflict remain facts of life today, it is the preponderance of security, stability, and prosperity that allows all nations to enjoy the benefits of peace that began 70 years ago. It is not our birthright any more than it was our fathers. It was a legacy that was presented to us from the ashes of World War II. Our legacy, measured against this backdrop, will be how well we preserve the peace presented to us as a gift from these decks 70 years ago. Many of those who lost their lives in bringing us peace will be honored here today and into the future. May those who honor them be mindful of the burden and the responsibility they bear to ensure that the gift of peace and freedom is sustained. May God bless those we honor here today with eternal peace as we seek the same for us and future generations. Thank you. Mahalo.
Thank you, Admiral Swift. The Battleship Missouri is committed to sharing its history and the feats of our veterans with today's generation. Each year, we invite students of Hawaii to share their thoughts about this historic anniversary and what it means to our nation. Please welcome Dan Parsons, our Director of Education at the Battleship Missouri Memorial, who will tell us more about the essay contest and introduce this year's winner. Dan?
Good morning, crew members, veterans, special guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Education Director here at the Missouri Memorial, it has been a pleasure to conduct the September 2nd essay contest each year since 2012. Our first year, we received less than a dozen entries, and now in our fourth year, which marks the 70th anniversary of the end of the war, we coincidentally received 70 essays. The Battleship Missouri Education Department staff met and read each essay and determined our winners. In addition to the first, second, and third place winners, we decided to award honorable mention to 4 additional student essays, which were also very well written. The topic of the essay was The Day That Launched a Better Future, and students were asked to create an essay that explains which choice was made by the Americans in the world. Was the 2nd of September indeed a date that would launch a better future? Or was September 2nd, 1945 simply another day in history that has little relevance today? The top 3 essays were written by students from James Campbell High School's AP English Language and Composition classes. Their teacher, Melissa Padilla, has joined us here today. Ms. Padilla? Ms. Padilla thanks us for giving her students the opportunity to write to an authentic audience. And she says hopefully this experience will show the students that their ideas, when well crafted in writing, can connect with other people besides their classmates and teacher. Now I'd like to introduce the 3 winners. The third place winner will receive $50, a commemorative coin, a certificate, and a 1-year student membership. Congratulations to Zyrene Fa'abi. Ms. Irene is joined today by her mother, Doreen. The second place winner will receive $75 in addition to the coin, certificate, and membership. Congratulations to Eric Quang. Eric is joined by his parents, Janice and Victor Quang. The first place winner will receive $100 along with a certificate, coin, and membership, and will be reading his essay in a few moments. Congratulations to Isaiah Consintahan. Here today joining him are his mother, Maridel Akana, his sister, Irene, and brother-in-law, Josiah. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce Isaiah Consintahan.
Good morning. My name is Isaiah Kosenzohan, and I'm going to be talking about September 2nd, 1945, the day that launched a better future. On December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor was taken by surprise as hundreds of Japanese planes attacked the area, a date which will live in infamy as said by President Franklin Roosevelt in the wake of the attack. Following the tragedies of Pearl Harbor, the war continued where in August 1945, the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the first and last instances of nuclear weapons in war. About a month later, the war was brought to an official end when Japanese officials had signed the Act of Unconditional Surrender aboard the USS Missouri anchored at Tokyo Bay. The ship now sits moored here in Pearl Harbor, facing the USS Arizona as one of the bookends of that war. This year commemorates the 70th anniversary to the end of hostilities, and though 7 years have passed, it is still of great relevance today. As peace was made on September 2nd, 1945, it is indeed the day that launched a better future between our nations. But what exactly does a better future entail for us? What is it meant for our nations? In past times, friction and distrust were present as our countries were at war or dealing with the traumas thereafter. Both of our nations suffered from a great deal of losses as we endured the consequences of war. The attack on Pearl Harbor took the lives of over 2,500 people and wounded as many as 1,000 others. The bombing of Hiroshima wiped out 90% of the city and immediately killed 80,000 people, thousands later dying of radiation exposure. The better future that we live in today is a world no longer at war, but one enduring the peace between us. Since the end of World War II, the United States and Japan have relied on each other as allies to recover from the repercussions of war. Over the past decades, we have worked together in order to mend the once frayed relationship between our nations and have built a stronger foundation for peace. For example, after Japan's defeat, the United States led the Allies in the occupation and rehabilitation of the Japanese state. Between 1945 and 1952, the U.S. occupying forces led by General Douglas A. MacArthur enacted widespread military, political, economic, and social reforms. These reforms improved the economy by setting democratic standards to help those in poverty and implemented a new constitution that would improve the social and political systems by the same standards. Though some changes were reverted back after the Americans left, most are still in effect and support the peace between our nations today. In addition, our nation's trust has been heavily reinforced since peace was rooted between us 7 years ago. Our trust for one another continues to evidently grow, as in recent news, the United States and Japan have proposed a new military agreement in which Japan's military will have a more active role in global defense, bringing our nations closer. The proposal would allow Japan to defend regional allies that come under attack, a change that means Japanese missile systems could be used to intercept any weapon launched toward the United States. In other words, Japan could be taking part in aiding our defense. This is a big jump in Japan's military relations as their military powers were limited under the new constitution implemented after World War II. It is found in Article 9 of that constitution that renounces war and prohibits Japan from maintaining the war potential. Though changes were already made so that Japan could maintain their defense, the new proposal demonstrates the ample amount of trust that our nations now share and how our nations are moving forward through mutual respect. In conclusion, since the end of World War II, our nations today have secured a strong relationship that has brought us into better days. The day that has launched us into a better future, September 2nd, 1945, has allowed our nations to endure peace, no longer a war at war. The site of Pearl Harbor, where we faced sorrowful losses, and the site of the USS Missouri, where we established peace, remind us why we must safeguard our peace, free from the tragedies of war. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. Great job. And you can find the text of Isaiah's essay printed in your program. We're honored to have U.S. Senator Brian Schatz presenting today's keynote address. Public service has been the foundation of Senator Schatz's life. Senator Schatz has represented Hawaii in the U.S. Senate since 2012. He currently serves on the powerful Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. He is also a member of the Senate Select Committee on Ethics. Before going to Congress to represent Hawaii, Senator Schatz served as Lieutenant Governor for the state of Hawaii. And before that, he served in the Hawaii State House of Representatives for 8 years and also served as the CEO of Helping Hands Hawaii. Please welcome Senator Brian Schatz.
Aloha and good morning. I want to take a moment to recognize Isaiah, the future foreign policy advisor for the Pacific Command in 10 years, for his extraordinary remarks. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our veterans and their families who are here with us, and our distinguished guests, including Senator Hirono, Congresswoman Gabbard, Congressman Takai, and an incredible delegation from the United States House of Representatives, Mayor Caldwell, Admiral Swift. I'd like to thank the USS Missouri Memorial Association for bringing us together to commemorate this important day and to reflect on how it shaped America's role in the world. Today, we remember the extraordinary commitment that was required of the many Americans who made the ultimate sacrifice to defeat the forces of tyranny and defend freedom for future generations. It was here in this harbor nearly 74 years ago where peace was shattered and America was drawn into one of the most destructive conflicts in history. That day of infamy and the events that followed would ultimately galvanize more than 12 million Americans, men and women, to serve in uniform during the Second World War. It was a war that lasted 2,194 days, stretching from the piers of Pearl Harbor to the beaches of Normandy, from the densely forested Ardennes to the fortified shores of Iwo Jima. It was a war that leveled whole cities and left entire countrysides barren. It widowed husbands and wives and orphaned sons and daughters. It touched nearly every person on the planet. We remember the men and women who fought in the Second World War, those brave Americans who said goodbye to their families to protect their neighbors, who foreclosed the promise of achieving their own dreams to protect our freedoms as the greatest generation. They came together from across America, farmers, factory workers, students, spouses, mothers and fathers. This was the whole United States of America. They left their homes to fight an enemy they did not know, in places they had never heard of. They did not do it for glory. They answered the call simply because they loved their country, they loved their community, and they loved their freedom. We all know well the stories of courage and devotion, the Tuskegee Airmen, the 442nd Infantry Regiment. We remember their ingenuity and heroism, like that of Doolittle's Raiders, the Navajo Code Talkers, and the Nisei Translators. In remembering these Americans, we also recognize the sacrifices of the hundreds of thousands who fought with them in Europe and the Pacific, our partners from the UK and France, from the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, and the many other countries who took up arms to defend the world against fascism. We reflect, too, on the millions of Americans who participated in the war effort back home, the 6 million women who worked on the assembly lines helping to produce tanks and airplanes, the 20 million Americans who planted gardens in their backyards and on rooftops to grow vegetables and fruit, the families that rationed food and fuel the children who towed their wagons collecting scrap metal from their neighbors. Everyone was personally doing whatever they could to ensure victory. And so through the heroism and sacrifice of those fighting at the front and the commitment of their families at home, peace was restored on this battleship 70 years ago today. On this deck, on September 2nd, 1945, in Tokyo Bay, Japan formally and unconditionally surrendered to the United States, bringing to a close one of the darkest periods in history and ushering in a period of relative peace. Despite the exhaustion and trauma stemming from years of war, America recognized that it could not simply retreat from the world. We learned the lessons of the last great conflict, when revenge and demand for reparations from the First World War sowed the seeds of fascism in Europe, and when isolationism gave way to imperial tyranny in Asia. So instead of turning our backs on the world, we chose to turn our enemies into the allies that they are today. Japan was in ruins when occupation forces landed in 1945. Immediately after the war, American occupiers set out to democratize and demilitarize Japan, implementing land and economic reforms, improving working conditions, and granting women the right to vote. But reforms were not enough. The United States sent billions of dollars in economic and humanitarian aid to rebuild Japan. Most of that assistance was food. For even several years after the surrender, there was widespread starvation in Japan. It is hard to forget someone that sends you milk for hungry children, as Prime Minister Abe recalled in his recent speech to Congress. The decision that we made as a country to partner with rather than punish Japan helped to forge between our two countries what Senator Mike Mansfield described as the most important bilateral relationship in the world, bar none. Today, Japan is a leader in the Western world. We cooperate as partners to maintain regional peace. Our countries work together to stop the flow of terrorists and arms in the Indian Ocean. We work side by side in humanitarian relief missions and actively cooperate in maritime security and ballistic missile defense. The U.S.-Japan relationship is stronger and closer than ever. And so the greatest generation not only taught us about collective sacrifice and courage, they also showed us that the United States is the indispensable nation, that we are always needed as a force for peace and stability. We saw the Marshall Plan help to rebuild Europe and fight off communism. We saw American aid help Japan to recover and slow the expansion of the Soviet Union in the Asia-Pacific. We built many of the international institutions that still exist today in recognition of the basic idea that cooperation with other countries is necessary to sustain the peace. Of course, times have changed. We face new and unprecedented challenges today, from ISIS to cyber warfare and natural disasters. But like we did 7 decades ago, as Americans, we must decide how we want to engage with the world. And our efforts will stem from a spirit that says, when necessary, the United States will vanquish our enemies in battle. And after that battle, we will build a lasting peace. That tradition was born on this very deck 70 years ago today, when America emerged victorious. And so we owe it to this greatest generation, the men and women who sacrificed their dreams so that we could live in peace and freedom, to memorialize that tradition today and carry it forward into the future. Thank you.
Our thanks go to the U.S. Pacific Fleet Band for their wonderful music today, and thank you to DSAPAC Joint Honor Guard for the flag folding ceremony. And we were honored to present the flag to Mr. Donald Forsberg, who witnessed the ceremony on board the USS Missouri and is celebrating today his 89th birthday. I know he's a little surprised and overwhelmed. Thank you for being here. We now wish to remember those who have given to their country and all of us the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedom. Please pause for a moment of silence in remembrance of all fallen veterans, those of wars past and present. I'll ask you to sit for just a second. As our remembrance ceremony draws to a close, I want to thank all of you for being with us today to commemorate this day of peace. Thank you to our guest speakers, Chairman Tim Gard, Isaiah Kasintahan, great job Isaiah, Congressman Mark Takai, Admiral Scott Swift, and Senator Brian Schatz. Most of all, our heartfelt appreciation goes out to our veterans, the men and women serving in our armed forces, as well as their families, for their honor, their commitment to duty, and their service to protect our nation and our freedoms. And a special thanks to the veterans of this ship for taking the effort to come here today. Please stand for the benediction.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we will never forget the greatest generation that literally saved the world. We stand here on the USS Missouri in awe of what happened 70 years ago. We are inspired and motivated to make a difference in our world so that one day all people can live in peace and freedom. Heavenly Father, bless everyone here in attendance, and may their hearts be uplifted and greatly encouraged by this ceremony today. All these things we pray in your mighty and merciful name. Amen.
So this concludes our commemoration ceremony. Mahalo for taking the time to join us on this historic day. We invite all of our guests to visit our special end of World War II exhibit and see the rare artifacts in the wardroom. And with that, I would have to say mahalo and aloha.